Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 252 for Monday, July 3rd, 2023. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is Johnny, but you may know him as the rebooted Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello. Not quite fully rebooted yet, but I'm still processing some stuff. We've been talking about that in the render distance. The dark clouds are still over Joel in Canada, and the dark clouds are mostly over my head as I deal with my PC issues. We've been chatting about both of those in the render distance. That's the extended version of the podcast, which you can get over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. If you sign up to our Patreon, you get a special RSS feed that has a bunch of bonus content in it, and it's the first episode of a new month, so we like to give our patrons an extra thank you for their support and to remind you of the upcoming events in our patron calendar. The monthly Minecraft Hangout from June had to be postponed due to my PC issues, and we will be back with that soon, but stay tuned for exactly when, because my PC might need to be sent off to be repaired, so we'll try and figure out a date for that soon. Otherwise, we'll do a mammoth episode of it later in July, when everyone's had even more opportunity to get deeper into 1.20. We should also have a quarterly Hangout arriving sometime later this month, so once again, stay tuned for the dates on that as well.
So what has been new in the world of the Minecraft Survival Guide Season 3?
Yeah, I've just completed a structures week in Survival Guide. I talked about that, I think, a little bit on last week's show. We've been looking at some generated structures. We already had shipwrecks and desert temples, so I did a little bit of early archaeology stuff in the desert temple and the desert well. But after that, I went to a couple of different abandoned mine shafts, one at deep slate level and one in a Badlands biome. And incidentally, some very keen-eyed people went back through my footage, and I found a comment where somebody pointed out that there had been a desert fossil generated above me in part of this abandoned mine shaft that I hadn't noticed because the bone blocks generated inside of the sandstone. And I need to go back there and do an episode about fossils now, because that's the first time I've really run into one without going, okay, I need to scour this desert biome or swamp biome in order to find one. So kind of excited that I stumbled upon that without really knowing it. Structures within structures somehow became the theme, because the last thing I went to was an igloo, which generated in a really weird spot. My base is in a hilly region. It's right next to a meadow. The mountain with the cherry grove on it is obviously kind of the landmark that I'm closest to. But south of there is a really tiny snowy slopes biome, which is literally like a chunk of snow, and then that's kind of it. You know, it's not perfectly square, but there's basically about enough blocks to cover a full chunk. And an igloo managed to generate off to one side of that in a flower forest. Like, it's separate from the biome itself, but probably just generated on like one corner of a block, and that's where it decided to start the igloo in the world generation. So that's in a flower forest, which is already a really weird place for it. But then I thought, okay, that's a great opportunity if it has a basement to go down there and start talking about villager curing and tee up this week's videos, which are all about the process of dealing with villagers and trading and that kind of stuff. And so I went down to investigate the villager curing, sort of the zombie villager and the villager next to each other in the cells, and I found out that a zombie spawner had generated in the back corner of this igloo basement, and it had overwritten enough of the wall of the igloo to let the regular villager out and almost get him killed by zombies. So It was immediate, like, Benny Hill music playing in my mind, chaos, which was super fun, though, because I think there was a skeleton that had spawned in there already, because there was also, like, no lighting in there with the spawner. There's torches that generate naturally in the igloo basement, but it wasn't enough to reach the back corner of the spawner. Skeletons are going to leave the villagers alone, but one zombie spawned as I got down there and luckily targeted me instead of the villager. So at that point, I was able to rush in, light up the spawner, and think, well, now I've got basically a built-in villager zombification and curing set up on my hands.
Wow.
So I talked through the process of curing zombie villagers, and I'm not doing it yet because I'm still playing on normal difficulty until later on in the show. I tend to upgrade to hard difficulty and talk about the differences between difficulty settings. But one of the things I talked about straight away was, okay, if I'm on normal, there's a 50% chance that this villager zombifies if it gets killed by a zombie. There's a 50% chance that he just dies and I lose a villager. So I'm not going to be messing around with this until we're fully on hard difficulty and I can zombify them 100% of the time. But that was just one of those hilarious, like, coincidences. And the funniest thing about it is it's exposed something to me that I was vaguely aware of but had never really run into this issue before, and it's that some people's worlds aren't going to have that zombie spawner because in some cases it will fail to generate because the igloo structure overlaps it. And somebody in my comments even had the insight that maybe it's to do with the direction that you approach those chunks from when you load it for the first time. The game can fail to generate a structure if there are obstructions in the way. And so some people who are sharing the world seed, playing on Java Edition, playing in the exact same version that I am, went to see that igloo and said, wait a minute, mine doesn't have a zombie spawner. What are you talking about? How has it done this? And so it's really odd to me that despite the parity between not just Bedrock and Java, but the seed being able to be played across everybody else's different versions, there are still some occasions on which those anomalies will occur and they won't get 100% of the things that I have. And a lot of people are now saying this seed is too good to you. Like, this seed is like throwing you all of these treats, like a fossil that you barely even notice because of the abandoned mineshaft you're exploring, and a built-in zombie spawner as part of an igloo with a zombie villager in there. It's fun. I'm having a lot of fun with this world in general, and the only other thing I did this week was explore nether fortresses, where I have one in a soul sand valley that I basically showed up in after making a portal back from the desert, and that one doesn't have an interior. You get to the point where the hub of the nether fortress is, with that lava well in the center, and then the corridor that should extend beyond that just wraps back around into outside parapets. So I'm like, that's going to be a wither skeleton farm someplace down the line. But at least I had another nether fortress I knew about that I could go and raid the chests, get the new armor trim, get all of the nether wart and everything like that. But for a second there, I had a nether fortress that didn't have any of the interior stuff. So it's been throwing me a few curveballs this week, but I've been enjoying it despite the PC issues.
Something that's really lucky and really cool about that is that you are a Minecraft player that has enough experience to take advantage of that nether fortress for the wither skeleton farm, to look at that zombie spawner clipping the igloo and know, hey, down the line, this could be a really easy way to get villagers turned into zombified villagers and back again for trading halls, all that kind of stuff. And I think that it's a great thing that the seed is being quote unquote too good to you, because I think it gives a real opportunity for you to create some cool things down the line and plan for that. Not to mention, as you said, you're having fun. Like it adds more enjoyment for someone that's played, countless Minecraft worlds over their time,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really nice to have such an ideal environment to be making tutorials from, because, yeah, it makes my job a lot easier. One of the things that is harder to consider about this stuff, and the approach that I've had to take with it sometimes, is this is still, I'm still playing Minecraft professionally, quote unquote, right? I'm still trying to use my time as efficiently as I can and get to more of the tutorial stuff without having to do the grind of exploring for ages. And that's one of the things where if I was playing this world like casually, I might be looking up more stuff in chunk base, or I might be looking up less stuff in chunk base so that I can have, more of a discovery experience of this world, whereas it helps me to know where some of this stuff is. It helps that I can find a mineshaft that has a couple of cave spider spawners in close proximity to each other, so that I can then discuss, here's what we do when we find multiple spawners nearby each other. Mm-hmm. And just having convenient stuff like that pop up really makes my job easier, so I don't have to go searching for it artificially or otherwise.
That's something that I miss about having a new Minecraft world, is that sense of discovering like that really cool nether fortress that's perfect for a farm or is going to suit your purposes really well, or having those triple spawners. Like we had that on the Citadel for the longest time. A triple spider spawner, cave spider spawner, was our source of XP. It was our source of string. We had all kinds of stuff going on that particular project, and it was great for the longest time. It did us, I think, right up until we had the gold farm. I think that was like by far the best XP, because you didn't have to travel very far to go. It was right in the meadows, Dartmouth Meadows, kind of our spawn town. And that discovery was just really cool when I realized, oh my gosh, there's like 2 or 3 blocks that I can stand on that activates all 3 of these spawners, like by a hair.
Yeah.
You know, you had that opportunity, and I thought this is really cool. I've seen people build spawners before. I've not built one personally, I don't think, at that point, but I was like, now I have the challenge of like, how do I figure out how to do 3 of these?
Yeah.
You know, so there was a lot of math. There was a lot of graph paper because I was brand new. Like the server was only, a couple weeks old at that point. But yeah, it's that those kind of discoveries are really, really fun. It gets outweighed for me by the grind of like not having all the blocks and not having all the armor and not having all the enchants on your boots and helmet and all that kind of stuff. Like that's where I start playing into Minecraft world where I think like it's nice and shiny, and then I hit the wall and I'm like, oh right, everything that I want to do is going to take me an eon until I'm all, until my progress. I think the progress grind is where I get caught in a new world in Minecraft, whereas the exploring grind, I never seem to get bored of that. Like I'm always happy to travel over the next hill and wander around and see what cool things are out there, especially now with all the new generation of biomes. And we've got, of course, the Caves and Cliffs update, and then we've got trail ruins. Like there's so much stuff out there now. Even just rowing across the ocean or flying around the ocean, when I was looking for that cherry grove a week or so ago, seeing ruins and thinking like, oh man, I should, I have to make a mental note on these, because like there's sniffer eggs I have to think about, there's armor trim I have to think about. Like there's all these reasons now to slow down and stop when you're out traveling around the world, and I think that's something that I don't think gets too old for me, is exploring and seeing what's around the corner. It just then becomes like how much do I want to add to my to-do list of, this is a cool place to build something, and he's like, now I've got like 7 projects for the next 12 years in Minecraft.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely been taking screenshots of coordinates left and right when I do live streams, when I'm like just exploring, between clips, and I stumble across like, I row across an ocean to get to this village I'm working with now in the savannah, and there's an ocean monument on the way, and I go, well, that's a future episode once I do potion brewing and this and that, and I've got like a long checklist of stuff to do at this point. Hopefully some of which I'll get to do before I send my PC away to be fixed up. But yeah, that's been my week. Played a little bit of Minecraft Bingo as well. That's had a couple of updates recently for balance, so when you need to find stuff from geodes, it's nice and quick to find those now, where they were previously very scarce. They now generate a lot more frequently in those worlds, so that's super handy to have a format like that that's continuously updated. I think is really fun. So I've been playing a bit more of that as well. But that's me. How's the Citadel looking these days?
I have not done a lot of progress on the Citadel this week because I had to cancel a couple of streams. One, I just took the day off because I needed to. The other one, I just had other things going on, and it just was a conflict. And they just happened to be my days, or 2 of the days, where I had a Minecraft stream scheduled. So like Wednesday I played Satisfactory because that was the day that worked, but it's also what's on the schedule. So I try to stick to, the expectations of what people are coming for. So I only had a couple of streams in Minecraft. And to be honest, I'm feeling a bit of burnout on West Hill. And I think it has to do with the slow and or tedious things that have been at the bottom of the to-do list. And they're going to get done. They're just things that look really good in the end, like a custom swamp biome out the front of the front wall, custom foliage in front of different places. I've done it before. It looks fantastic, but I know how long it takes. And I also know, like, it's one of those things where you have to have an absolute ton of different stuff in your inventory. Like, you're just constantly full of stuff, and it becomes a tedious experience building the way that I want things to look. So I know I've been kind of putting that stuff off. So I did a little bit of puttering on my streams this week, where I still had a couple more hanging signs I wanted to do. I had finished up most of the hanging signs in the west last week, or the week before, and then I went down the main road. So the entry had a spot where I wanted to put something. It was like a book and quill, which looks really cool on a hanging sign. I also went and copied a couple of different symbols to see what would work. And I found like, I don't know what they're called. It's like a bullet point, like if you're doing a list. And I copied one of those and brought that over. And in Minecraft, it just turns out to be like a pixel square, but it looks like a nice little tack, like a nice little nail or something like that. So I was able to use that in conjunction with the armor stand data pack, the Armor Statues data pack, excuse me, from Vanilla Tweaks, to get like a little book and quill hanging outside of, I guess we could call it a registry office. It's like, hey, you're new to town. You should let us know who you are. You're here, like that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it would be called or why people would even bother to stop, but it makes for a functional building at the front. So I did that. And then there was like a mess hall farther down that was meant to be like a place where the guards would go to drink, different than where the townspeople would go to drink, have a pint, that kind of thing. And I've been using a vertical sword to kind of indicate different areas that are guard or kind of military related in the town. So I just hung, again, a vertical sword with the Armor Statues data pack on a hanging sign. And it looks good. Like it makes sense. It feels really simple. I did a cobbler sign, which now this brings in another data pack. I have they go by Axle now, the Axle tables and chairs data pack. And one of the tools that you get, which allows you to change the tables, is a furniture hammer. And so because I can make that hammer, I made the hammer and I hung the hammer on a sign with a tripwire hook. And it looks like kind of like a hammer and a shoe tack a little bit. So right, that's the cobbler sign. And then last but not least, this had nothing to do with hanging signs. This was all data pack. But the Northern Barracks has an evenly spaced door. It's 4 blocks wide. So you can't really hang a hanging sign in the middle of it because you don't have a one central block. And I've done this before on the leather shop where I've taken 2 spruce trapdoors and used the Armor Statues data pack to put a leather tunic. Kind of looks like it's tacked up or painted onto these. So it looks like a leather shop sign. So for the barracks, what I did was I used 3 armor stands. I put the armor on one, and then I put a sword in the hand of each. And a fun trick that I used was I used a stone sword and an iron sword. And the stone sword is behind the iron sword. So it kind of looks like an illustration where you'd put the sword behind in perspective in shadow, just because the stone sword is a darker gray than the iron sword. And so you've got this kind of like chest armor with crossed swords. It looks like a crest over the North Barracks entrance. And I thought it was really fun. It worked out well. And while I was there, I got a little bit, not out of control, but the perfectionist in me said like, oh, wait a minute. It's been a really long time since I've made this door. I've made better doors since. So I added like smokers and some functionality with like a button and a lever to the door to make it look like if they shut the door, they could then lock the door. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of stuff was fun. But that's it. Like I went in there and I had a loose plan of what I wanted to do. And I just started walking up and down the streets and going like, oh, that needs something. And oh, that needs something. And oh, I forgot that cobbler sign and that kind of thing. So that's what I did for most of the day. I think the only thing where I didn't finish everything was I started getting into chiseled bookshelves. And man, do I prefer these over the traditional bookshelf.
Well, they're customizable, right? Like, so you can do a whole lot more with them and combine them with the other bookshelves as well. It's not like an either or situation. So
no, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then the traditional bookshelves or the vanilla bookshelves, I don't know what you could want to call them, just bookshelves. They look like they have files on them now to me. Like the books don't feel that beefy. And the new ones obviously feel like books, like bound leather, gold leaf kind of books. And what I like so much about the chisel bookshelves is that by filling them up, not all the way, it adds some life, some movement, some use to the bookshelves. It looks like something has been picked up and put back, and maybe not put back exactly where it was supposed to go. And I really like that. And it adds that level of depth. So I was taking down a lot of looms that I had put up on the walls that looked like empty bookshelves. But you always had that choice of like, is it an entirely empty bookshelf or it's a bookshelf? Well, now you can have partially filled bookshelves. You can have mostly empty if you want them to be. The other thing that I really like about the chisel bookshelves is that they're directional and that you don't have bookshelf on all 4 sides.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't make any sense to have a bookshelf kind of facing a window, then you don't. You can use the chiseled bookshelf to have it face forward. And I haven't done it yet, but I've got a funny feeling that chiseled bookshelves are going to come in handy because they have a really cool pattern on the top. And imagine as part of a floor, they could look pretty decorative if you wanted to do them, use them that way. I have had mixed results intermingling bookshelves and chiseled bookshelves. I think the best way to do it is pay attention to the books that you're placing in the chiseled bookshelves. There's two that are like magenta and purple, and there are no magenta or purple books in the regular bookshelf. They're all blue, green, red, and I think maybe yellow. And so if you remove the purple and the magenta books from the chisel bookshelves, they look like they go better with the traditional regular bookshelves.
Right. Yeah.
And so whenever I did that, and I was like, this looks kind of funny to me. And it's because like the one chisel bookshelf that I put next to the regular bookshelf, there was a purple book on it. And as soon as I switched out the purple book for like a cyan or a blue in it, I was like, yeah, I can live with the different placement. Because unfortunately, in the chisel bookshelf, the top right is always purple, right? And I think maybe the bottom, it's the bottom middle, maybe it's always the same color no matter what you do. And so that to me was like, okay, I have to remember, like if I'm using a mix, I have to not do certain areas, but they're really expensive. You go through a lot of books very quickly because of how, because it's three books in a bookshelf, right? And then it's 6 books to fill up a chisel bookshelf. So it's twice as many books. You go through them very, very quickly. The actual bookshelf itself is not that hard to make. The thing that I am really hoping for is that they give us a choice to use either chiseled bookshelves or regular bookshelves for enchanting.
Sure.
Because I really feel that they would increase the visual appeal of an enchanting setup. Enchanting setups to me just feel there's only a couple of different ways to do them and have them look halfway decent. They always just feel like something functional you have to do in Minecraft, and then you either have to hide it or do your best, and you're never really happy with it because you're so tied by how it works. And I think that while it would be more expensive, I'm okay with the higher expense for materials to have a better looking enchanting setup if they would allow us to do something with the chisel bookshelves. And I mean, if they really wanted to create some unique ideas, have the distance that chiseled bookshelves need to be from an enchanting table longer. Like if you could widen the distance and maybe have it be a little bit more customizable, then that would be really cool. But only for chisel bookshelves, because if they're more expensive, they're more late game. So, you get more range out of a fancier one than you do a regular bookshelf. But I had fun with them, and I ran out of material, so I have not really completed the full pass of West Hill where I'm going back and I'm replacing the ones that I want to be chiseled as chiseled bookshelves. So I'm going to have to go and get more leather and more paper for that. But when I do, I'm absolutely going to be doing a full pass and just kind of like going through a bunch of buildings and being just like, yeah, this needs some and this needs some. And I think it'll look much, much better.
Do you have silk touch on your axe?
Yes.
Because that's the thing that tripped me up when I first made a chiseled bookshelf, was I broke it using a regular axe. I hadn't got my enchanting setup like fully done yet, and I still don't have silk touch on my axe. And I forgot that because regular bookshelves work this way, if you break it without silk touch, you get the books back, but the shelf itself breaks. I forgot that that's also the same with chiseled bookshelves. So you don't get the bookshelf back, you just get whatever contents it had, and if you break it without silk touch on its own, if there aren't any bookshelves in it, you just don't get a block back. And I was like, wait a minute, this thing isn't made of glass, what's going on? And then, it's another thing that takes a little bit of adjusting, but if you're a player who's already got an established set of tools and you prefer silk touch on your axe anyway, as all discerning gentlemen do because you get mushroom blocks out of it, then I think it's one of those things that's never going to really come across your radar. But that was one of those things that I had a double take when I did it the first time in the survival guide world, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a mechanic I need to remember, is that you don't just get the shelf back because you need silk touch for it.
I was actually considering on stream putting down some of the bookshelves that I was removing and breaking them with a non-silk touch axe so I can get the books quickly to then put in the chiseled bookshelves. Because I've got enough wood that I can make, anything I want. But the books is, and it's late game. I have enough leather and I have enough books. I don't think it would be a problem. The thing would just be like, I have to stop what I'm doing. I have to go back to Dartmouth Meadows, or I have to go back somewhere where I've got all this stuff stored around the server. And it takes time to go get it and bring it back. So I just have to maybe just prepare myself for that kind of run, or the next time that I'm going to do something like repair my elytra or repair a pickaxe, just remember to add to the to-do list, get more leather, get more sugarcane or whatever it is that you need, right?
I honestly turn to villager trading for getting lots and lots of bookshelves because you can buy them from certain librarians if they have that trade in their
Oh,
opening
right.
their opening trades.
Ah.
So yeah, like that's typically how I end up getting lots of bookshelves for big projects like decorating a massive library or something like that. Is
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy them all from librarians, and we'll get into more villager trading stuff in today's main discussion actually. But in the meantime, how about we get into the news?
That sounds like a plan, even though there is not a lot of news, just a single item to discuss. The Minecraft team will no longer post official changelogs to the Minecraft Reddit. Slice Slime informed the Minecraft Reddit community that after recent site-wide changes to rules and moderation across Reddit, quote, "We no longer feel that Reddit is an appropriate place to post official content or refer our players to," end quote. He later clarified that this only refers to the Java Edition changelogs, which have been posted on Reddit by either himself or another member of the Java team since 1.15. This does not mean the Minecraft or Microsoft team will stop posting on Reddit in an official capacity, just that they're stepping back from seeing Reddit as a place to share official release information.
Yeah, I figured this was worth including just because, again, there's little to no snapshot or beta news from either Java or Bedrock Edition, but I think this is important to discuss from a community perspective.
I'm not a Reddit user, never have been, and I've been on a little bit here and there to kind of like get into information from games where the user base uses Reddit a lot. Like Satisfactory is a good example where there's a lot of stuff that's shared on Reddit. But I don't like the design of the platform. I've never found it really reliable for information because I find that if I get like tech help, I'm looking up how to do something online and it takes me to Reddit. I get someone saying, "This is how you do it." And someone saying, "No, that's not how you do it." And I was like, well, which is it? And I find it really unreliable in that way. So I'm not in the know. What are the changes that Reddit has made that's pushed this decision from the Minecraft team?
So, without getting too far into it, because again, this is something that I only understand from a peripheral kind of community perspective, it's that Reddit is sort of following suit with a few other apps that are charging for access to their API. I think Twitter has been doing this recently as well, and that's purportedly to prevent people from training AI models using, say, Reddit discussion boards for machine learning without them having to pay for it, right? But the problem with this is that it's also priced out third-party Reddit apps used by folks like you who don't really like the design of the platform, and it makes it kind of more palatable or puts it all into a readable RSS feed or whatever. And many of those can't afford to keep up the price of API access and are closing down. So recently, a bunch of subreddits, there's been 9,000 plus, I think almost 10,000 subreddits, shut down in protest. They went private over a weekend to protest the changes to the API, and that included r/Minecraft. And then they were forced to reopen. There's a thread about this that I think is stickied at the top of the Minecraft subreddit if people want to go there for the information about this. But the moderators were told in general terms, but fairly concrete terms, that they were likely to be removed and replaced if they kept the subreddit locked down, despite the fact that on r/Minecraft, they took a poll and the majority of the community was in favor of continuing to protest the API changes. Basically, the overall impression that we're getting from this is that Reddit is sort of in a position where they're putting profit before community, at least as far as the community perspective goes. And so it seems like, as somebody who's been using Reddit for a while and is, sharing the changelogs and whatnot, Slice Slime sort of either made the decision or discussed it with his colleagues, and they collectively made the decision that Reddit just kind of leaves a bad taste in the mouth at this point, and as a community-focused post, it didn't really feel like the right sort of place to be sharing it anymore. The folks who run the Minecraft subreddit are probably still going to be posting the changelogs, but they won't be coming from an official source in the same way. So they'll be compiled by whoever's been doing that previously. I'm pretty sure one of the mods used to do it before Slice Lime and the Mojang team saw that as an opportunity for it to come straight from the horse's mouth, as it were.
Right.
So that'll still continue, but it'll be in less of an official capacity.
Well, that makes sense, because I've had a couple of Twitter applications that I really like just stop working / no longer accessible to me because of the API changes of Twitter. Same deal where they are charging companies for it or charging more for it than is, attainable by these companies. I think it was
Yeah.
Tweetbot. I think was one of my favorite Twitter apps, and it wasn't free, but it was like I was happy to pay the $4 for the app because it was such a good experience compared to using Twitter natively. And for someone, I have less now, but back when I was doing several podcasts, I had many Twitter accounts because we'd have to, broadcast that there was a new episode, or we'd have to, advertise someone that we'd be interviewing on Comics Coast to Coast or something. So I had like several different, accounts that I had to manage, and switching on the Tweetbot app, I think it was a lot easier. And I think I could even have like different colors for like your profile. So like you could log in and realize very quickly, oh, I'm on the wrong profile. This is blue. I need to be on red for me, or blue for Comics Coast to Coast and stuff like that. I could be remembering it wrong. It's also been a long time. But yeah, like that kind of stuff. When these companies change, and this actually touches a little bit on what we were talking about in the render distance too, when these platforms decide to change and are no longer keeping the interests of their users top of mind, the ripple effects are quick. And I mean, it's the internet. Sometimes there's a lot of heavy reactions, and I'm not saying that they're all warranted, but in times it can feel like people are jumping ship, or it feels like, well, if this happens and this stops being a place where I get my Minecraft news, like where do we go? And the thing that I will point out is that while there is always a blog post when they have a snapshot or they release a new version of Minecraft, I rely on our Discord to find the link for it, because sometimes even going to minecraft.net on a Wednesday when there's a new post and you've seen people talking about it, it doesn't show up. Like it's not there to just click on. It's not like it's top of the page to say, yeah, there's a new thing. It's whatever, system they have there. It's not always really easy to find. And if someone was using Reddit in a way that puts this right in front of them the day of, the moment it comes out, I can see that being really frustrating.
I think the decision to remove the changelogs from Reddit, because it's sort of taking this anti-community stance, is honestly in line with what Mojang have been doing with this update, with the update having such a focus on community and inclusivity and that kind of thing. Jumbo Sale in our live chat's also pointing out that there are apps that are built on the Reddit API that moderators use to help moderate, or disabled users can have improved accessibility for the site, which if those go away, then that cuts out a large portion of the community. And so it kind of makes sense thematically speaking with what Mojang have been doing with 1.20 to say, well, we need to have a community focus, because without the community, what are we,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just it felt like a poignant decision in the within sort of recent context of what they've been doing with Minecraft itself.
And I think, if it's something that, one of the most popular video games on the planet can make a stand on, then great. I think that that's something that you don't see enough of. Like, sure, users will get vocal online about different changes to different platforms, but when big companies can say like, nope, this is wrong, and move or make a decision like this that won't really so much affect their users, because as you said, like there's probably going to be other people that'll pick up the slack, and that information will probably still get out there. But in an official capacity, I think it says something. It reminds me of the stuff going back and forth with Streamlabs Desktop and OBS Studio, and how a lot of people were just vocally saying like, I'm a big streamer and I'm just going to use OBS Studio. I'm going to teach myself how to use it because I prefer the way that they're doing business. And I think that kind of stuff matters depending on the size of the organization that's making the change.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on into chunk mail for this week. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. We're loving all of the emails we're getting about the 1.20 update and what people think, what features you are focusing on, and all that kind of stuff. But we have an email that comes from a slightly different perspective. This one's from Imp Imperfect, who is returning to Minecraft after a decade. Hi, Joel and Pix. In last week's episode, 251, you asked for the experiences of people returning to Minecraft. I started playing Minecraft just after InfDev turned into alpha. I won't bother you with my personal history, but life happened, and I quit playing all video games in 2011. I started playing Minecraft again during the early pandemic, nearly a decade later. My first experience with new Minecraft was not being able to craft a bed because one of my 3 wool wasn't white. I didn't make shields for 6 months simply because I constantly forgot they existed. Now I've beaten the Ender Dragon multiple times, I have maxed out enchantments on my full netherite gear, and a trading hall with 40 villagers, and it only took 3 years to catch up. From my perspective, horses, nether fortresses, and dark oak forests are equally as new as netherite, illager raids, and bees. I couldn't tell you whether foxes are newer than acacia trees or not. One of my least favourite new additions are the Drowned. On the other hand, the recipe book is a brilliant addition now that the game has a truly ridiculous amount of crafting recipes. I'm curious to hear from people who've started playing Minecraft recently because I feel like Minecraft now has a learning curve as steep and long as a software like Blender. Imp Imperfect walked into a pit of lava because he was too distracted wondering how the tradition of death message sign-offs began. That's an interesting question. Should look that up in the lore of the podcast.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's been a long time. Like it happened early on, and then people just sort of jumped onto the train, and it snowballed.
Yeah. It definitely snowballed.
Yeah. They're more interesting and broad now. Not everyone dies in a pit of lava in every sign-off message. I would say 8 out of 10 people don't make it, but there's still some colorful, interesting ways that people are distracted by lovely sunsets or something. They don't always end up, in a demise situation. But for a while there, it was like not morbid. It wasn't gross, but like people were really getting hammered. There was a while where no one was surviving in their sign-off messages, and in very distinct and swift ways. It was just like, there is no question, you are DEWD dead when it comes to the sign-off messages. But I've always liked them. I think that, and the more clever they are, the more I enjoy them.
Yeah, definitely. So to the emails point, it's interesting to get the perspective of somebody who had a nearly 10-year gap in their playing history, and that would be the case for a lot of people who are coming back to Minecraft around, I think 1.13 was really the biggest update in recent memory for returning players. And so a lot of people sort of showed up to Oceans having a bunch of new stuff in them, from Ocean Temples and Guardians that had been around for a while at that point, to all of the stuff that was added in the update Aquatic with kelp and seagrass and turtles and dolphins and whatnot. And so, yeah, suddenly, and the Drowned, Imp Imperfect's least favorite new addition. But you end up with a very different perspective on the world after that, and that's not counting everything that's happened since, with terrain generation being totally different. I expect some people, if they get the right world seed now, if you return to Minecraft having played in previous editions, you must think you've loaded up an amplified world with how tall some of the mountains get. And the potential to spawn in mountainous terrain is definitely part of that.
Thought it was really interesting that they brought up the learning curve, because, when you compare Minecraft in 2023 to, say, 2012, and for people that are unaware, that was the very scary update, which introduced witches, bats, wither skeletons, and the wither in 2012. In 2013 was 1.5, the redstone update that brought in hoppers and comparators and a bunch of other new redstone components. And I didn't come into Minecraft until the very, very tail end of 1.11. So 1.12, the color update, was the one that I got in there. That had like glazed terracotta and some other stuff. I think concrete was in there too. And for me, I feel like because I've been playing the whole time, I don't feel that big smack in the face about a learning curve or things getting more complicated. But I have compared Minecraft to, like, it's digital Lego. You're talking to somebody at a dinner party that doesn't quite understand what you do, but they know Lego because Lego's been around for like 75 years or something. And so they say, okay, well, that sounds pretty simple. But as someone that builds Lego on a regular basis, I can tell you Lego is no longer simple. Like, you can have some extremely intricate and complicated builds. I'm building Ecto 1 right now from Ghostbusters Afterlife, and some of the connections are blowing my mind. Like, some of the things in this, it is a very cool kit. And when I think about what I do in Minecraft, like you and I, creating Minecraft content, and some of the other people we've had on this podcast and people that we watch on a regular basis, if you're new to the game and you're watching somebody play Minecraft at, I will say this level, not to kind of separate, but like just for the sake of a good way to say it, I could see it being very intimidating. Like, especially if you happen to come into something like a Hermitcraft server when it's at the tail end, or it's been up for 6 months, right? And you go, my gosh, I'd like to try this game, but how on earth do these people do this? I think it's no longer just like placing blocks on top of each other and building like a little square house. Like when you see, like I still have this reaction when I watch, Whip or Mythical Sausage build something. I'm just like, wait a minute, hold on, back up. How did they do that? Because it looks so unlike what I've experienced sometimes in game. And that now, data packs and mods aside, even just the vanilla game, for me, like I look at it and I think like, man, is it accessible for new players now? Like if you were just coming into it, like how much of it would get overwhelming really quickly? Because you start to get those recipes in the recipe book and things start to unravel like real fast. Like there's the broadening happens, and you might have even just experienced this recently. So because now, and it's different when the content that you make is tutorial natured. So obviously the Minecraft Survival Guide, season 3 really helps people that might be new to the game, or parents or spouse or partners or family members of people that are into the game that are just like, I just want to understand it, but like I can't quite get it. Having a tutorial series is great. But as you were playing, do you remember the moment when all of a sudden things started to get more complicated in that playthrough in season 3?
I mean, not really. It's like it's gradual enough for me at this point, and I have enough experience with it that I don't think it's too bad. I think really it's just the choice paralysis of like, which direction do you go once you've been mining for the first time, and you've got your first diamonds, what you spend those on, whether you immediately go mining for more and stockpile those and go to full diamond, or if you want to spend a bit of time exploring and trying something else instead of spending the whole early game in a cave. But I think one of the balancing acts that Minecraft has sort of perfected, or at least been very good at over the years, is keeping a lot of mechanics either intuitive or discoverable. Because the entire game is based on this foundation of you left-click to break something, you right-click to place it or interact with something. And if you can't do anything with it yet, you don't have the right tools yet. So you can kind of muddle your way through for the most part. And I'm really glad that Imp Imperfect mentioned discovering the recipe book, because that's how you learn. You can't make a bed with multiple colors of wool. It reminds you how to make a shield if you forget that shields exist. You can look that stuff up in-game now. And that wasn't the case when I started playing Minecraft. I started on a simpler version. It was on the Xbox 360 version, which was around the time I was playing it, was the equivalent of, I think, Minecraft 1.3 or 1.4. Horses hadn't been added to the game yet. I don't think the Wither was in there either. They just added nether fortresses and blazes and emeralds and trading and that kind of stuff, and anvils. And so there was a bit of a leap between that and Java Edition for me, but by that time I had enough experience with the Xbox version that I knew what was coming in Java Edition because I looked at the Minecraft wiki and I knew what was missing from my game. I was like, oh, I'm looking forward to making hay bales and experiencing podzol and things. And so, like, I drip-fed that stuff through community knowledge, through the Minecraft wiki. And that's the kind of thing that I'm now trying to recreate for people through series like Survival Guide if they're more visual learners and they want a video reference for that stuff. And I think Minecraft's learning curve is only really steep if you go into it expecting to learn everything quickly. In the case of, the Hermitcraft server or whatever you've been watching, if you're expecting to reach the level of experience of the stuff that you've seen from people who've been playing frequently for a decade, I think it's still possible in Minecraft to do a lot of stuff manually, and Minecraft is very forgiving about that. So you might look at Redstone and go, oh, I don't really know what to do with that. That's kind of like a foreign concept to me. Let me try and figure that out in future. And you're sort of muddling through, and you learn that you can connect a pressure plate to a door and it opens, and that's Redstone. You're doing Redstone now. And so you figure out little things like that help your gameplay as it exists right now, instead of going to like, well, how do I make a computer with this? Like you don't always make that leap immediately, and that's where the steep learning curve begins. I think people can quite happily harvest bamboo by punching it without ever learning that it's more effective to cut it down with a sword. But then there's a layer of depth there where, like, every time you cut down bamboo with a sword, because a sword is meant for combat and not breaking blocks, it takes 2 durability off the sword, so your sword breaks faster. There's, like, levels of knowledge that you don't really need to know, and it's all being conveyed to you pretty much visually since there's less text in the game. And so you can figure out some of that stuff on your own slowly, or you can go the level of like diving into the community knowledge pool and finding all of that stuff out. But then if you try and retain all of that knowledge at once, it's going to feel overwhelming. Before you even figure out what an observer does to build an automatic bamboo farm that is then getting you all the bamboo that you need for this new block that's suddenly in the game. And it can feel overwhelming, but I think the strength of Minecraft has always been in community knowledge, whether it's the wiki, whether it's YouTube videos, however you find your information. So, just talking to friends about Minecraft and understanding people's experiences from the last little while, you'll pick up odds and ends. You'll listen to me and Joel talk on the podcast, or you'll listen to, somebody talking about it in real life, or you'll watch a video, and you just retain one or two facts about Minecraft that you didn't know before, and that's how your own knowledge base builds. And that's how you eventually get enough experience that some of the stuff that's new to you now will start to feel natural after a little while.
I'm glad you brought up that Minecraft does manual so well. I think that because it makes it accessible and it gets you through a huge chunk. We still have a manual tree farm. There is no automatic tree farm on the Citadel because we just know enough ways to get tree wood fast enough that it just doesn't warrant, we also don't have a TNT duper. So like there's certain ways that it just wouldn't make any sense. Or it would be more work than it would be worth. But I think it's worth that experience of like chopping down sugarcane manually, chopping down bamboo manually, to the point where like, all right, well, I have a lot of this, but for whatever thing that pops into your head from the next project, that's when you're like, okay, now I need a ton of this. And I do not want to do it manually because I know what that's like. And I think that's an interesting kind of point where like you reach that necessity point where like, okay, I don't have time in my life to do this by hand. Like I have to figure out a different way to do it. That pushes you into more complicated stuff. And I think that's also a good point about the choice paralysis. And I think that's maybe where some people feel that Minecraft could be intimidating, where for the first little bit in the game, in a new world, you're guided by progress. You're guided by protecting yourself, feeding yourself, surviving, exploring a little bit, stuff like that. But when it gets to the point where you're like, as you said, do I want to mine more? Do I want to explore more? Do I want to build more? Do I want to look for these armor trims if you even know that there's more than one out there? Like that kind of stuff I feel like is where people get overwhelmed and they feel like, well, now I have to make a decision as to what to do, as opposed to following the rails and kind of like going through the progression. And that's an interesting point too. On the flip side, I don't know that Minecraft from 2013, if you drop it into a modern gamer, like pretend if you can that Minecraft doesn't exist, and it comes onto the scene in its 2013 format, I don't think people would be that interested in it. I feel like it would feel pretty simple compared to other games like Fortnite or Deep Rock Galactic or Satisfactory, or like even within its genre of sandbox, builders, I feel like it might feel a little bit behind, or a lot behind, really. That's one of the reasons why I get so excited about the new additions like hanging signs and like the not programmable skulk sensor. What they called? They're called calibrated. Thank you. Calibrated skulk sensor. Like those kind of changes, they help make Minecraft more modern in a way. And I think that it keeps it accessible to, I want to say, the savvy gamer that's coming into Minecraft, having played a lot of other similar games. I think they'll catch on and be more satisfied quickly. Whereas if someone's coming in, I often think about people that are new to Minecraft as not necessarily gamers. Like I feel like they're also new to gaming. For I don't know why. I think because Minecraft is just such an accessible game that's usually younger kids that are brought into it at first.
Yeah.
And if it's an older person, it's usually a younger person bringing them in. Just statistically, I would say it's probably like parents coming in to play with their kids, that kind of thing. And I can see that, and I would be very interested on the data to know, like, of the new players to Minecraft, how many of them are also just in general new to gaming, in their lives at this level. It'd be a very interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, maybe at some point we'll get an email from somebody who's like, I have picked up Minecraft yesterday, and or they picked up Minecraft because they found out about this podcast. It seems unlikely because I feel like we're pretty deep into Minecraft at this point, but yeah, we'll see.
Next email comes in from Evil Shadow, Wandering Armor Trim Traders. Hey, Pix and Joel. Hope you're doing well. In episode 249, you talked about the possibility of villagers having an armor trim as a trade option, but I think it could be exploited very easily. This got me thinking about trading for armor terms in general, and I think it would be most balanced by doing it with the Wandering Trader. They could have a very low chance of having an armor trim, which could be locked to a single trade so the player only gets one armor trim. They could either have all of the existing armor trims, or they could have a unique armor trim only available through trading with them. In Minecraft 1.17, we were hyped to see these traders for small drip leaf, whereas normally they'd not get much uses. So adding an item which can only be obtained through trading with them could make players happy to see them once again. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you for reading. Evil Shadow found 2 extra leads in his inventory because the trader had no trims.
And we will always be left wondering what happened to that wandering trader.
Exactly, right?
I think I might have mentioned this either as part of our previous discussion on armor trims or subsequently, but Voodoo Beard, who's a data pack creator in the community, has a trim trader data pack over at mc.voodoobeard.com. We'll have that linked in the show notes. And that's a data pack that effectively does what Evil Shadow is suggesting. The Wandering Trader always sells a randomized smithing template, which is either one of the 16 trims or the netherite upgrade. And each trade costs 8 diamonds plus the template materials. So 8 diamonds and some netherrack will get you the netherite upgrade if that's the trade that they have available. It kind of makes it similar to the duplication crafting recipe, adding another diamond like as almost like the Wandering Trader's fee, and because you don't have another item to throw in there as the upgrade template. But I think that's a neat way of doing it for people who don't want the exploration aspect, for maybe people who are reticent to travel to the dangerous structures like ancient cities and whatnot. But then I do think that part of the value of armor trim is in exploration. Like that's the idea behind it, is to give people more incentive to explore and be excited about structures. So you're really just removing the reasons people are excited about structures and giving more excitement to the Wandering Trader in exchange. It's sort of like a one for the other trade instead of something that feels like an expansion to armor trim trading.
And I mean, he's ransacking all of these places and stealing artifacts from cultures and selling them to you.
Yeah, so, he's looting with those llamas are his accomplices.
He's a wandering
always.
Pirate.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea, and I agree with you. It only works if the trim that the armor that you get from a Wandering Trader would be unique to the Wandering Trader. So this goes back to what we talked about either last episode or the episode before, where Mojang has laid the grounds for potential expansion should they want to. And if they decide, we have an idea for one more armor trim, but where are we going to put it? They could give it to the Wandering Trader as like, oh, here's yet another armor trim. If you want to go get it, then you can get it. And it would be probably, I won't say easy, but as accessible as like finding it in a shipwreck, because you tend to run into shipwrecks fairly often. You tend to see the Wandering Trader a lot. So it's basically just a matter of time before you get a trade for an armor trim, if they were to give one to the Wandering Trader. Now, I say that, and I also remember just how long it took a member of the server on the Citadel to find drip leaf from the Wandering Trader, to the point where like they weren't happy to see them. It was more like, I'm angry at you by default. Will you surprise me, or will you give me leads? It all depends on whether or not you have drip leaf. And I think for me, it's not going to change my mind about the Wandering Trader. I don't particularly find them that useful, but again, that's coming from end game. I think I would look at the Wandering Trader a lot differently in a new game, that kind of thing. I think also for me, what we've done and how I can kind of run a parallel to this is that we have the Wandering Trades data pack from Vanilla Tweaks on the Citadel, and that trades mini blocks. So they're player head sized versions of all the different blocks in the game. But of course, you don't get all of them in a single list from the Wandering Trader. It has a random assortment every time they show up. So it makes me actually want to go over and trade with them. I have to have enough emeralds. I think it's 1 emerald and a block of that type gets you 8 mini blocks, as if you've cut a Minecraft cube into, 8 little quarter chunks, or eighth chunks, I guess is a better way to say it. And I found it really useful. They're fun to decorate with. You can put like little versions of beehives and barrels around, and it really has changed most of the time that I see the Wandering Trader. If I'm not in the mood, if I'm building something that doesn't require mini blocks, or I already have enough and he's just in my face, I'm fed up. I don't want to deal with him. But for a while there, when I was doing a lot of interior design on the West Hill build, when I saw the Wandering Trader, I'd be like, "Ooh, stop the presses. Let's stop what we're doing. Go get some emeralds and see what they've got." And I think that is to me, it would say, if they had an armor trim and armor trim was something that you were interested in, I think it would change the way that you see the Wandering Trader, if you knew at some point they might have a unique trim to trade with you.
And I think the Wandering Trader's outfit being quite recognizable, you could do something similar to what you do with the Vex armor trim, where it's got the Evoker's eyebrows on it. Like you could maybe style your armor a little bit closer to the Wandering Trader's outfit, and that could potentially be a fun way of doing it. I think the problem with the Wandering Trader's outfit is because it's more about shape than it is about style, but you still have that like gold outline around his hood and everything that you could maybe add to a helmet, and so there's potential there. Yeah, I do like the idea of adding more stuff to the Wandering Trader in the sense of it being a unique item to him, because that does give people more incentive to interact with him and look at it more positively. I don't know if necessarily him having all of the other armor trims is it almost feels like it's too much.
Oh yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Considering that his highest value trade is like 6 emeralds for some blue ice right now, it sort of feels a little bit like, they're too overpowered at that point. But like I said, for a almost like an accessibility feature, if you like as a way of incentivizing people to try out armor trim if they have no interest whatsoever in seeking out an ancient city, then maybe it's good for players who are like that. Or players who play on Peaceful and want to get the Elder Guardians trim. Although, do Elder Guardians spawn on Peaceful? They just don't attack you? I forget. I can't remember exactly how those mechanics work.
Well, speaking of trades, you had something that you wanted to talk about in the main discussion this week that involved villager trades.
Yeah, obviously I'm at the stage in Survival Guide when I'm trading with villagers and looking at villages kind of for the duration of this week, probably. And so I've been pondering a few questions about the role of villagers in 1.20. And it's the kind of ideas that maybe we haven't quite had the dust settle yet on what, the way villagers balance now that we've got a few new additions. But I think as far as like the diamond balance goes, like does having diamond equipment trades from villagers feel a bit more balanced now that armor trim is giving us extra uses for raw diamonds, right? So is this a good direction for Mojang to take it, where they can, comfortably add additional uses for diamonds, knowing that villagers are there for the player if they feel like, they need to have an extra diamond pickaxe, they can just go and buy one from a toolsmith. The other stuff that I've been thinking about has largely been from community feedback on my comments and streams, where people have said, why aren't there villagers for cherry groves? Why isn't there like a village that generates in a cherry grove? Since plains villages generate in meadows, but meadows don't have a unique villager, they just have a plains village generate there. Does that happen in cherry groves? If not, why not? And if there are all of these different unique villager outfits, including jungles and swamps that don't have villages that generate naturally, why can't there be one for cherry groves or mangroves or the deep dark? And lastly, should Mojang consider adding some of these new features to villagers' trades to diversify the opportunities for players to encounter them? Like, should the toolsmith trade you an archaeology brush? Or is it better that these villagers remain kind of static and they have this set of trades that they already have, and they can kind of let new features speak for themselves and encourage the exploration that we've seen growing as a theme in Minecraft's recent updates? Regardless of that, I would like to preface this discussion by saying, given my recent PC issues, I'd also like to discuss backing up your worlds. Please do it. I will remind everybody to back up their worlds. That's the first note I took for this show, was like, regardless of main topic, tell people to back up their worlds. Do it now. But yeah, going into it really, I think villagers are one of those features which takes Minecraft into sandbox territory more than survival game territory, and that I think is the fulcrum upon which a lot of these arguments pivot, because it's easy to farm tools, armor, weapons from even a basic villager trading setup, and you're getting stuff with default basic enchants. You can grindstone those off and re-enchant them if you want to. And for a lot of people, I think that rubs up against their idea that Minecraft is a survival game, and that stuff like this should be difficult to obtain. And I think really the villagers belong more into the sandbox style of gameplay, where it's another avenue for you to explore. You know, if you want to obtain a diamond pickaxe really quickly, you still got to put a bit of effort in trading with a toolsmith. But once you've done that, infinite diamond pickaxes, as long as you can throw some sticks at a Fletcher to get emeralds in exchange. And so I think it's really important for them to introduce new uses for raw diamonds to sort of balance that, especially in late game when you're stockpiling diamonds and you kind of look around going, what are these for? And, you know, one of the options that you can do with raw diamonds is to craft them into fireworks, because they have a unique pattern to them if you craft them with a diamond. And it's like, so now I'm just blowing these precious resources up. These things that started as the most valuable thing to me at one point, the only real use for them now is, you know, diamond blocks everywhere, disposable things, jukeboxes, that kind of stuff. So I do think it's a good thing, although I don't know for certain if armor trim feels like a good long-term use for a stockpile of diamonds, and that's it. But I think it's maybe going in the right direction, and I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
So with the villager trades, because we're so late game on the Citadel, I just happen to have enough diamonds sitting around that if I need a new chest plate, or if I need a new pickaxe, because I had to upgrade some netherite stuff recently, and so I didn't have the right diamond axe or whatever, and I just made one. You know, like, because I have enough diamonds lying around. So I've not really used villager trades for tools so much as I have used the librarians for enchanted books. And that's because I would much rather do that than mill around with the enchanting table trying to get the RNG to give me the right enchantment. I would rather grind through the trades with a librarian, work up myself to have enough emeralds to then get the exact book that I want for that enchant. Or at least a couple of books that I can combine. You know, like I'm breaking 3. If it's really cheap, you just get 2 and you combine them. That kind of stuff has been my interaction with villagers for the longest time. I don't even think we had grindstones when we built our villager trading hall. So it's old. For example, we're also, it was before I realized that Fletcher's had the best trade for emeralds. We're still using farmers. So wheat and carrots and stuff like that for emeralds. And I think pumpkins and melons too. But we have some low trades. Like, it's pretty easy to get enough emeralds to enchant some stuff, but it's not something I do very often, especially again because netherite has happened, and so I don't lose pickaxes and tools that often in lava. You know, because if anything, it's like I despawn, or I something falls in the ground and and it disappears because it was in a shulker box or something. That happens more often to me than anything else. And so when it comes to trading, like I don't really think about them for tools so much. Now, I think that would be a different tune if I was someone that played hardcore regularly, or Skyblock, or even a peaceful world. I think that for 2 reasons. With hardcore and Skyblock, well, Skyblock, you're just so limited. Like, you can't really dig for diamonds another way. So like that's kind of like the best way to get diamonds, diamond tools in Skyblock. With peaceful or hardcore specifically, maybe you don't want to go down to the caves because you're going to risk death in the end of your world if that's the case. And so it might be easier to get things going, with villagers. But also because I've been spending so much time on the Citadel in the last 6 years that I think if I was to start a new world, I would like, as you said, in the sandbox way, to take a different road. Like, I know I can just go dig diamonds if I want to, but I may not want to because I've done that before. So if you're trying something new, starting a new world, starting a new server with friends, and just deciding, you know what, I'm not going to dig for diamonds this time around. I'm going to try the villager trade route to see how good, bad, frustrating that is. Speaking of the frustrating, that's one of the reasons why I also don't deal with villagers and trading that much, because I do find them a pain in the butt to move around. I always threaten that I'm going to remove the sounds or change something about the way that they sound. I never do. That might be something I do in my sci-fi setup just for fun. But like, I feel like I need to look at them a little bit closer in some ways, because I know there are some things that I tried in the modern city to set up some masons because I thought it would be a better way to get a vast amount of quartz blocks for building in the modern city, because you need like the smooth, more modern looking blocks. And I think they ultimately died. Like I think zombies came in and killed them or something, or they got changed.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly what happened, because again, I feel like that might have been set up before the villager update where they had workstations and stuff. Well, no, that couldn't have been true because we would have had the masons at all.
Yeah, they'd have been stonemasons.
It might have been like we might have reset the server and then somehow didn't set it to hard, so they ended up like properly dying as opposed to
sure, yeah,
something like that. I don't remember what happened.
Like they've been zombified. It gets set to peaceful by accident, and they despawn.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. Because I remember losing them from the bank because I had them in the bank, and the idea was the basement of the bank was our storage for all the blocks in the city, and then the bankers, quote unquote, were the traders where you could get your mason.
they're all like tellers.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly where they were. Yeah. But somehow they died or they got out, and then of course the zombies got out and the zombie villagers got out and they died in the sunshine. I don't know how it happened, but I want to go back and address that because again, it would be faster and better than getting quartz the other way around. I think is quartz a trade for piglins as well, because that could be another way to do it.
Yeah, you get quartz items from them,
right.
but it's slower, and
right.
you end up with like you have to have a pretty substantial piglin bartering setup because you're getting like 12 other items with it, right? But yeah, I've also seen a few other people express that opinion that like getting the OP trades from villagers is worthwhile after the hassle of getting them to cooperate with you.
Right.
And it kind of depends on your approach. I'm sort of fine like, throwing them in a boat if they're not behaving and they just kind of like stick there, and you can break the boat with them surrounded in a box, and then they're at least in a 2x2 area that you can control.
Yeah.
And after a while, I kind of get used to wrangling them at this point. But yeah, I think as far as going back to the diamond balance thing, I think people, you've got to look at the average player, and not like the average player like you and I, the people who are sort of deep in Minecraft enough to be discussing it on a podcast. I'm talking about like the average player.
Right, yeah.
I think if you're talking about armor trims, there are 16 armor trims plus the netherite upgrade template. Each one of those costs 7 diamonds to reproduce. Assuming you want to clone each one once, you're looking at roughly 2 stacks of diamonds, like just under. I think for the average player, that's a pretty substantial amount.
That's not nothing.
Like I think... Yeah, like for the most part, like you feel like diamonds are a scarce resource if you're somebody who plays Minecraft for a couple of hours on the weekend every week. And so I think those kind of players would be happy to find ways to avoid spending diamonds on new tools and whatnot, so they could be spending them on reproducing armor trim and customizing their armor the way they want to. So I think the fact that armor trims now retroactively make the diamond trades from villagers kind of better is a good thing for this update. And it's a way to almost make villagers more valuable to the player without adding anything to them, which brings us to the next topic, which is whether or not these newer features that come in should be given to villagers as trades. The trades haven't really changed since 1.14. The same goes for village generation. Like some of the back-end tech might have changed, the terrain is different now, but villages and their populations have stayed largely the same. There haven't really been any additions to their number since the Village and Pillage update. And so there is, of course, the debate of, should a toolsmith sell you a brush? It is a tool. It is another thing that might diversify their trades. And maybe that gives you a reason to recruit one, and you travel with them to a trail ruins, and you kind of bring them in a boat with you, and you try and at least have that guy around so you can buy another brush from him instead of crafting one yourself. And personally, I always thought maybe stonemasons should be able to sell us calcite, since it's not currently a renewable block, but it's also a desirable one in terms of its aesthetic qualities, right? But it really sort of... It depends on your approach. Again, if you want to go down the villager trading route, I don't think villagers being a source of everything is necessarily the best idea, because that then shrinks gameplay down to a bunch of trading interfaces, when you could be going out and carving chunks off the face of a mountain. And I do think with this update, obviously, there is an emphasis on exploration. There's an emphasis on players going out and finding stuff out there in the world. And so expecting players to sit with a villager and go through their trading interface a whole bunch is maybe antithetical to what they're trying to do with more recent and more modern feeling updates.
Something that I like that's a parallel to that is that you don't trade with a mason for raw quartz. You get quartz blocks. And
Yeah, yeah.
if calcite had refined versions, Mojang, then you could give a refined version of a calcite block to a mason, which would make more sense. Like, why are they just giving you raw rock out of the ground? I can just go get that myself. But if they're giving you the refined version, then if you did want to use the calcite in its raw form for texture, which it has its uses, then you still have to go out and get it. In the same way that if you want to use quartz for redstone, you still have to go get raw quartz. You can't just use anything. You can't break stuff from a mason down into usable things for redstone. And I think by having options in that way would be good. But I think that's where the calcite thing kind of falls apart, because there are no other versions of it. And that's where you'd get that, like, it would undermine going out to get it in the world, as you said, because you can get it in its form out there. I think that when it comes to things like the brush, they could limit it. And I think that one of the things that they could utilize is the fact that they've given us different types of villages. And I think that if you were only able to get a brush for archaeology from a desert toolsmith, that could make sense. You still have to find a desert. You have to find a desert with a village. And then you can potentially get, a trade for a brush there. That would be cool, rather than just having any old village and any old toolsmith give you, be able to trade for a brush.
I would honestly want to expand that to desert and taiga villages, because then if you notice that they are the only two that trade you a brush, you're like, what's in the taiga that I could go and find?
That's a good call.
And that's maybe something that signposts the existence of trail ruins.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's still kind of fun if you find them, and you don't just find them in taiga biomes, but those are some of the biomes that they are more common. So yeah, like, I think that has a precedent in the sense that there are some trades which are biome specific, or at least villager outfit specific. Like right now, fishermen villagers trade boats depending on their biome outfit. But there are only 5 boats that are represented in that. Birch boats have never been traded by any villagers. And then mangrove, bamboo, and cherry are not present in any of those. They haven't been added since those wood types have been added. So you have desert and jungle villagers both trading you jungle wood boats. Taiga and snowy villagers both trade you spruce boats, and swamp villagers trade you dark oak boats. So you have to either find a naturally spawned zombie villager in a swamp and convert it, or breed villagers in a swamp biome, or end up with one of those villages that's sort of halfway over into a swamp biome, and some of the villages generate naturally there. But it's kind of interesting to me that you have the opportunity, let's say, for desert or jungle villagers to now trade you a bamboo raft. And then you kind of think, well, how do I make that in the first place? Let me get some of this bamboo and actually turn it into wood. There is potential there for villagers' trades to be expanded into different biome variants, and for the biome variants to have more unique variety to them. I think that's kind of a neat concept, because it's already possible by virtue of the fact that they have different boats based on their outfit, but they don't tend to make the individual trades of different groups of villagers ever really unique. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying about the Wandering Trader having its own unique armor trim. There are so few things which you can only get from one place, especially with villagers. I don't think there are any villager trades which are unique to villagers. You can acquire everything in different ways. And it's curious to me that they don't give more unique stuff to villagers. They don't lock specific items or blocks behind villager trading as a unique concept, in the same way that you have to get a Totem of Undying from killing an evoker. It's not quite the same principle. And so, yeah, I'm kind of curious if there's any development philosophy behind that, if it's just that these are a resource that you can find and, players should be able to get stuff multiple different ways, but that applies to villagers and not necessarily to some of the other stuff that you can find out there, like totems and whatnot.
Pure speculation, but I would imagine that if there was something that was just attainable by villagers, and if it was something that I really wanted, I would be rolling my eyes like, ugh, now I have to deal with villagers. Like I feel like that might be part of the friction in that setup, where in the same way that some of the best blocks in Minecraft are designed in a way that you can use them as intended, or you can combine them with other situations, or in context they could be used in a different way. The way that we can use glazed terracotta on the wall of a cafe in a modern city and have it look like a painting as opposed to just looking like a glazed, terracotta block, like a floor pattern or something like that. And I think that those kind of blocks are really, really cool. And I think that having two different ways to get the same thing in Minecraft, whether you want to go mining for it, it's like, do you have the time and not care to deal with villagers, so you're just going to go grind for this stuff, or do you have the patience to deal with wrangling these guys and then want to deal with that, and then once it's done, never have to go wandering looking for these things again? And I think that that's the trade-off, right? And I think it just kind of goes into different ways to play the game. I think too, like we brought up accessibility earlier, like if you're someone that cannot play the game for long periods of time for whatever reason, or you've got mobility issues where wandering the world is not the easiest thing for you to do with your controller, then being able to set up villagers, which I don't know how much easier that would be, but if it was just set up, and you were able to do that, then you no longer had to take this, the time it would take to go looking for certain items. If it was just something you could trade with, then I think that's a good way to have it in the game too. For unique items and unique villages, I am surprised that there's not something like a Cherry Grove village, because of how unique and cool the Taiga village looks and how unique and cool the desert village looks. There's the cherrywood is so unique and so interesting. And I mean, I'm sure there'd be lots of people that would love to have the ability to stumble upon a pink village, and I mean, the trunks of those trees are quite dark too. Like you could have a very interesting looking space. I think maybe, because we go back and forth on this a lot, one of the reasons that they don't do that is that they might want to encourage players to, like, well, what would your village look like if it was built in a cherry grove? And I will say, the first cherry grove that we stumbled upon on the Citadel had a natural occurring village that kind of, like you said, spanned those two biomes. It must have been like a meadows or something. And then it was surrounded by, in some parts of it, it was nestled inside of a cherry grove. It looked really cool. It looked very, very cool, to the point where, like, I didn't chop that one down. I went and found another one to chop down and left the one with the village in it for someone else to maybe mess around with. But that would be a cool project, to take a village and turn it into a cherry grove village, or what you would imagine it to be. So I can see why maybe Mojang doesn't do that, because then you're kind of taking away a potential player project, right?
Yeah, and I think it adds scope to the update for both like the art teams and the gameplay teams if they add new villages, new structures, and new outfits to every update that introduces a new biome. And that's still minimal reward for the player, because the villagers there are most likely to have the same trades that they have in other places. Right. So it's not necessarily a desirable additional feature when there is scope for them to add more stuff that's unique and interesting, like trail ruins. And so, yeah, I think there's a couple of pros and cons in each column, really. Before we get away from it, I will also point out that G the Bee and Avery in our live chat pointed out that there are some unique villager trades from the cartographer. They give you the exploration maps that you can use to find woodland mansions and ocean monuments, which, while they aren't necessarily unable to be found without those, will at least point you in the right direction and have an icon on the map that says this is where it is. And also the globe banner pattern cannot be obtained through the loom, as far as I'm aware, unless you obtain the banner pattern from a cartographer villager. Like, you can't make that one, you have to buy it. So that is, again, it's a cosmetic thing, but it is important to note that those are unique trades for a village. So yeah, there's a few other things that are still kind of percolating in my brain that I don't quite have the right words yet for how I feel about villages in 1.20, but I'd be kind of curious to hear if anybody else has found that they're a lot happier with villagers trading diamond stuff now that they're using all of their diamonds for armor trim and stuff like that. That, I think, though, is where we will wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Thank you so much for listening, folks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can participate in the live show recording, listen in live as we record the show every week. week. And our monthly Minecraft audio hangout, which was postponed from June, should be hopefully coming up later in July, where we're hearing from patrons about what they've been building in Minecraft this last month. We currently have 299 patrons, which is down from 300 for the first time in a while, but mostly, I think, because Patreon hasn't processed everybody's payments yet. They usually fluctuate a little bit at the beginning of the month. Special thanks, as always, go out to our content engineer patrons who help really make this show possible. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sail, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
It's also worth noting that this weekend in both Canada and the US is a banking holiday, so that's probably why some of the patron stuff is behind.
Fair, yeah, makes sense.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance and say you should listen to The Spawn Chunks, and you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube. Be sure to leave a rating or a review on your favorite platform. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by PixelRiffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/PixelRiffs, where this week I will encourage you to check out my community post that has a few more details about how my schedule is changing with my PC potentially being absent for a while, getting fixed up. In the meantime, I do still upload the Minecraft Survival Guide Season 3 there, and I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the YouTube series and play a bit of Minecraft Bingo when I feel like I'm not going to make too much more progress. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com, including a link to the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I'm streaming almost every day. I'm going to be dialing things a little bit lower for the summer holidays, maybe get out some hiking, get some extracurricular activities in there. But Lego is regularly on Fridays, Minecraft the rest of the week, with a little insert of Satisfactory on Wednesdays, and I'll see you there.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but you should still back it up.